Hello everyone and welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be taking a look at this album here. It's the last album released by XTC Wasp star, so I'll just be doing the usual thing in this video, giving a bit of background information about the album, showing you my vinyl copy, and then looking at each of the album songs in detail. So as I said, this was the band's final release. It came out in the year 2000, and yeah, it was recorded in tandem with its companion album Apple Venus Volume 1, which was released a year prior. Now, I have found this book very useful in my research for this video. This is a book called Song Stories by guy Neville Farmer, with also contributions from the members of XTC. And yeah, like, this was really fantastic book. Can't recommend it enough. But yeah, quite interestingly, like, I learned that from this book that they were originally had intended to make these two separate albums to be released in the mid-90s, kind of one after another. However, following the release of the previous album Nonsuch in 1992, they had a bit of bother with their record label. Essentially, they wanted to upgrade their contract, because they were still on the same contract which they'd signed way back in 1977, and were wanting a bit of an upgrade. However, Virgin Records said no, so the band actually went on strike, so they didn't record any music for a 5-year period, and I think they were recording home demos and things for themselves, but they were never going into studios to formally record anything, otherwise they would have lost the rights to their songs. So eventually, after this kind of 5-year kind of stalemate, they were released from their contract and started releasing music on their own label, Cooking Vinyl was the name of the label, and then this is the kind of stage that they were at when they published this book, because this came out in 1998, so a year before the albums, and at this point they were thinking of releasing a double album, so this would have 22 tracks on it. It was Partridge's idea. He thought, yeah, we'll release, we'll come back with this kind of grand double album. However, it was the other members, Colin Moulding and Dave Gregory, who preferred to keep the albums separate based on their respective musical styles, with the more orchestral and acoustic tracks appearing on Volume 1, with the more rockier tracks appearing here. But then at the last minute, they must have won out, Moulding and Gregory. Even despite Gregory leaving the band halfway through the making of the albums, this book published in 1999, they were still set on releasing a double album, so very much must have been a last minute decision to revert back to the original idea of releasing two separate albums. So the band were particularly proud of this whole collection of songs, the whole Apple Venus collection, believing that they were the best set of tracks they had assembled. While critically, though, the albums which were released do divide people. More often than not, though, the first album is praised to the hilt, for its very advanced musical composition, as well as the kind of lush orchestration, as well as the lush orchestral arrangements. However, this record is often seen, I guess, a bit as a messy afterthought, or simply the leftovers. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of very positive reviews for it as well. Commercially, it did alright. It reached number 40 in the albums charts here, which was slightly weaker than the top 30 performances of Oranges and Lemons and Nonsuch. However, it was quite a bit better than Skylarking got here, which only, I think, scraped number 90 again, the charts. So yeah, still a top 40 album here, though, for XTC. So I wish I'd show you my vinyl copy of it. This is a reissue of it, what came out a couple of years back. Thankfully, it was reissued. This was one of the first ones XTC did reissue. They are slowly working through like the whole catalogue, reissuing everything. And this, thankfully, like I said, was one of the first ones they got round to, because originals of this are very difficult to get. Now, I must say, with these reissues, they haven't been too faithful to the original copies. I believe original copies of this were on a double vinyl, if I'm not mistaken, and I also had a fancy gatefold and slightly different cover art. I believe it had a kind of banner like along the top, but I do like this reissue of it, though. I think they've done a good job of it. This is the inner sleeve. This is the kind of sleeve which is in all the XTC reissues. Just shows all the albums and what what reissues are kind of set to come out. And like I said, this was one of the first ones came out, I think in 2018 or 2019, and we've since had all most of their other albums have since been reissued. We've then got these this insert as well. Again, believe this was newly created for this reissue. Don't think this was on the original artwork, but yeah, you've got the lyrics there and then a picture of the band. The band, at this point, produced a duo of Andy Partridge and Colin Moulding, as Dave Gregory, like I said, left halfway through the album. And I believe that all of his contributions up to that point were wiped as well, or kind of re-recorded by Partridge himself. So I want to go over each of the album's tracks in detail. So I'll score each track out of 10 and then use those scores to give us a overall percentage marking for the album. So it kicks off with the song Playground, which is a really good rocking start to the album. I would say it's maybe their most rocking track since things like the Black Sea album. Really reminds me a lot of that album's opener, Respectable Street, with this kind of sort of crashing guitar riff and these kind of thundering drums on it. Lyrically, it's a look back at kind of Partridge's school life, kind of using that sort of imagery off a kind of school playground as a kind of metaphor for kind of wider society. He sings that it marked by the masters and bruised by the bullies in the playground, and then rehearsing for the big square world is another line on it. So I really love this song. I think it's a great way to kick off the album. It's a track I do really love on the album, so we'll get a 10 out of 10. I'm stupidly happy. Next track up is Stupidly Happy. Now, this is a great song, I think. On the surface, it's a very simple track, both lyrically and musically. Very kind of optimistic lyrics, and sort of he's basically just singing about how happy he is, basically. And then this really repetitive guitar riff which goes throughout the song, and then it kind of essentially the bass line as well is just kind of one note going throughout it. But part of the magic of this song is the way it builds, the way different instruments are added kind of layer by layer as the song progresses, and then by the end of it, it's a kind of lush kind of wall of sound. I think so. A great track there. I think should have been a single. I think it would have had great potential as a single, just because it is a upbeat, happy song. It's a kind of it's a simple song, but I think would have really worked and could have potentially been a hit. It might have not been a big hit, but I think it could have had some kind of minor success. But as it was, overlooked as the single. Don't you get those headaches in another life? Next track up is called In Another Life. Now, this is the first Colin Moulding contribution on the album, and I guess lyrically it's about the kind of down-to-earth lifestyle he was now living, in the 5 years off they had while they were on strike. I think Colin really kind of just spent time with his family. I don't think he really worked too hard during that period. But I do like the song. I think it's got a kind of good kind of earthy feel. You've got a kind of harmonica kind of going through it and a kind of stompy kind of rhythm to it. Apparently, I've read this one dates back to the Skylarking days, so again, perhaps he was kind of for these albums, when they were kind of working on it, went back to some of his earlier compositions and kind of tried to kind of work out if he had anything decent left over. And this is certainly a really good track, and for me, we'll get an 8 out of 10. Next up is called My Brown Guitar. Now, this is a really good song. I think it's a decent track, but perhaps a bit weaker lyrically. I think, especially on the chorus. I think it's a generally a bit of a kind of sloppy kind of double entendre, I guess, like basically just like for sex, to be honest, like with you. But I think the song is rescued though by a lovely arrangement though. Again, I like the kind of quiet verses where it's really just Partridge's voice and like this kind of guitar, and then the kind of production I think really works. But yeah, like as a song, kind of lyrically, not a big fan of it, but I do think musically it is really good. So yeah, for me, we'll get a 7 out of 10. Next track up is called Boarded Up. Now this is another Colin Moulding song, and it's basically about the kind of closing down of kind of public amenities and I guess kind of like houses as well, kind of like being like boarded up and like left like to rot. But it is a kind of all like this is a track where you can definitely tell he has, I guess, aged a little bit. I'm not sure how old they were like when they made this album, possibly getting into like their 50s, I would say. But this track is a much more mature and kind of grown-up song. Very kind of similar though, like thematically, to say things like Ball and Chain, or things say on like the Big Express album, where they're kind of talking about kind of sort of like their town and like kind of social issues and like whatnot. But for me, this track has never been a favourite of mine. I do think it is a bit boring, and I do confess to sometimes skip it like when I'm listening to the album. So yeah, Boarded Up for me would get a 5 out of 10. It's not terrible by any means, but it's just like never been a big favourite of mine. Okay, then side 1 closes off with I'm the Man Who Murdered Love. Now this is a really good upbeat song. Again, I perhaps previously wasn't a big fan of this track, but it has grown on me quite a lot. I think it's a fun song. Lyrically, it's about, I guess, a man who feels he can do the world a favour by kind of like eliminating all of like the love like from like the world, kind of because of like the kind of like the pain and like it can bring out like in people, and like those kind of painful and kind of sad emotions like you can get like from it. But yeah, no, a clever song lyrically, I guess, like in like that regard. But I do think it maybe towards the end gets a little bit annoying. I think the chorus repeats itself maybe like a few too many times, and I think it could have really done with like a good bridge, this song, to kind of perhaps give it a bit more structure, make it seem like a little bit like less like repetitive. Now this was the single from the album. I think a decent choice there, like as a single, but unfortunately it didn't do anything, completely failed to chart, like as is usually the way with like XTC. But yeah, like a like a good song there though, and we'll get an 8 out of 10. So you won't mind if I kiss you now. Okay, well now we're flipping over to side 2, and that kicks off with We're All Light. Now this is another good upbeat song. I would say production-wise, this does kind of, I guess, reek of like the early 2000s, basically. It is very noticeable, the kind of like production on it. But I do really enjoy this song, though. I think it's very different for XTC. I think it really stands out, like in like their discography. Especially like the kind of like the pre-chorus part. You've got these beautiful harmony vocals on there. And yeah, it's just a really great song. Lyrically, again, like it's a lot of fun. I think it's about a kind of guy kind of, I guess, trying to like impress a girl with all these kind of facts. He sings like on it, like, did you know, like Jack and Jillian years ago, some dinosaur dropped the pail when it saw our reflection. Those kind of things. He's sort of spewing out like all like these kind of facts and that. So it's quite a kind of fun song, like lyrically. And yeah, for me, one which I always enjoy whenever it's on. So yeah, We're All Light, we get a 9 out of 10. Now these shoes fit all too well. Next track up is Standing In For Joe. Now this is the final Colin Moulding song on the album, and it's easily his most upbeat and I guess most kind of old school XTC sounding song here. A real kind of toe tap like off a track, and again lyrically it's a lot of fun. About a guy who kind of has a affair with one of his best friend's wives. So yeah, like it's delivered in a very light-hearted kind of way, and I guess it shows that despite Moulding's other kind of slightly more mature contributions to the album, he could still have a lot of fun like with a track. Another thing to note with this song though is the kind of melody of it is pretty much lifted from a Steely Dan song. I believe it's Barrytown, which is pretty much identical, the kind of melodies. I am surprised that like they weren't sued for it, but I guess like if it had been more popular like this song, they probably would have been sued. But like as it was, probably didn't make XTC like any money, so any money like themselves, like, so I don't think that Steely Dan suing them like would have made them like any like financial gain. But no, it is like identical to that song, like at least at the start, like off like the verses. But no, aside from that, a great track though, and yeah, for me, one which I always enjoy whenever it's on again. So that one would get a 9 out of 10. Next track up is called Wounded Horse. Now this is more of a kind of sludgy blues sort of song. I must say I'm not crazy about the kind of main verse and chorus part where he's kind of, he does kind of sound like he's kind of just moaning like a little bit like on it, and the kind of metaphor which kind of hooks the song like, and like that you'd be riding another man. It's a bit cringeworthy a little bit, but perhaps I guess drawn from Andy Partridge's kind of real experience. I think he went through like a divorce like in like the mid-90s, so I guess it is kind of drawn from that experience, but very similar, like I guess in theme to the song that like Your Dictionary from the previous album. But for me, what really lifts this song is the bridge section, like that bit where it goes like, well, my friends all said like just climb back in the saddle. That bit is both glorious melodically and also with the harmony vocals again when Colin Moulding comes in, like you can really hear him, and I think that bit of the song just really showcases the magic like of XTC for me, and like what they could create when they worked together, like Moulding and Partridge. So for me, a song really like of two halves there, but definitely one which I do like when you get to like the bridge again, like they like repeat like that section twice, and I think works really well. So yeah, for me would get an 8 out of 10 overall.
No matter what the weather, you and the clouds will still.
Next one up is You and the Clouds Will Still Be Beautiful. Now this is a great song, kind of I guess a bit of a reggae kind of arrangement to this one here, but I think a really good song. I read from the book which I showed Song Stories that this was originally brought in during the Nonsuch sessions, however it was too late to be included in that album, but I really like it. I think lyrically again it's a great song about I guess loving and admiring someone despite their flaws or despite the kind of situation like you may like appear to be in. He sings like, no matter what the weather, you and the clouds will still be beautiful, and it's just a really chilled out song, and I like it a lot. So for me, that one would also get a 9 out of 10. Next one is a Church of Woman, and this is a kind of pro-feminist and kind of based like a love song, kind of like only Partridge could really pull off, essentially, where he's singing to all women, and he kind of like admires kind of like the female sex so much that he's essentially getting like this track, like he creates a whole religion for them and wishes like to worship at the Church of Woman. So very kind of I guess wacky and a bit out there lyrically, but I do like it. And again, this is a track which really grows like and evolves. Starts off very kind of chilled out. You've got a kind of more acoustic guitars on it, and this kind of muted drumming. But then throughout the song, we then get a really great guitar solo on it, played by Partridge himself. This is a track like which he said that he was really trying to prove himself, like on this one here, that he could like sort of like match like Dave Gregory's skill like on like guitar. And it is one of the songs I guess you could almost picture Gregory playing like this solo. But I do really like enjoy this one. Again, maybe goes on a little bit towards the end. It is about, I think it touches like the 5-6 minute mark this one here, so maybe a bit too long for me, but good song though overall, so that one would get an 8 out of 10. And then the closing track is The Wheel and The Maypole. Now this is my favourite on the album, and it is one of my all-time favourite XTC songs. I think it is a perfect way to close out their career. It is a multi-part epic, this song, based around two distinct sections. So you've got the kind of wheel section, which is underpinned by this great guitar riff, and like then like the kind of bit where it says like, if like the pot won't hold our love, then we'll dash it to the ground. Like that whole bit just sounds great, really rocks. And then the kind of maypole section, which again perhaps, or I guess you could think on first listen like is a bit annoying, like where they kind of just repeat like the maypole, you spun me around, knocked me off my axis, that bit. But then you get this awesome section where it's just perfection, I think, like where it kind of talks about empires crumbling, wedding cake begins to must and moulder, and what made me think we were any better, and what made and what made me think we'd last forever. Was I so naive? Of course it all unweaves. It's almost like a prophetic line, that I think, a prophetic kind of final statement. Like, this was like, I guess, like in a similar way to the Beatles' Abbey Road, you know, did they know this was going to be the last XTC album, and did they want to go out with a kind of big statement like that? Again, generally just about life and the circle of life and that. So I think it's a great way to close off the album, and like a song, yeah, which I will probably never tire of. I think it is one of my all-time favourite XTC songs, so unsurprisingly would get a 10 out of 10. Okay, so overall, this album would score 84%. So I think this is a great record. It is, for me, one of my most played XTC albums. I just enjoy the kind of combination of the kind of catchy songs. They've really, their kind of way, like with a melody, hasn't been lost, ever really, in their career. And again, great melodies on this album. But I like how they've teamed that with slightly more rocking and harder edge production than some of the other albums. As I said, I think this is their most hard rocking album they've done since Black Sea, possibly. But as I said, yeah, unfortunately this would wind up being their last studio album. Personal difficulties would emerge between Colin and Andy, and I'm not sure if these are just emerged during the making of this album, or kind of again the aftermath of it, or if they'd kind of been under the surface for a little while. But certainly, after this record, they would grow quite distant and quite, I guess, kind of bitter towards each other. And certainly, today, they don't really have very nice words to say about each other, to be honest. So quite a sad ending, for XTC. But yeah, I guess in some ways, it's kind of where would they go from here? In some ways, they've done the kind of orchestral album, they've done kind of psychedelic things. So it was really, I guess, they kind of covered a lot of ground again, their career. And I think this is a great way to end it, a really underappreciated album, and like I said, a great way to round off a almost near perfect discography. So yeah, that's been my look at XTC's Wasp Star album. So yes, I hope you have enjoyed the review, and I will see you all next time for the next video. Goodbye.